So let's get everything installed. We're looking right now at a virtual machine running Windows 10. Everything you see me do should be just about the same on Windows 11, along with Mac OS and Linux. The only thing I've done so far is I have downloaded the links. Like I said, it's a brand new install. Let's put that away. I think I've done so far is install the links from the instructions I've sent to you. So we want to save these, presumably in our downloads folder. Now, one thing to watch out for, if you've never changed your settings on Windows, I'm not sure if this is still true in Windows 11 or not, probably, as you know, Microsoft. But if we download this file, so if we go here and save as, and we save our file, you'll see that Windows has decided that it's going to be a text file. And we don't want it to be. We don't want any of these things to be just TXT files. It'll show us what we thought it was, but it has actually renamed it. So if you haven't done this before, what you need to do is go to View, Options, View again, and down here to hide extensions for known file types. We really want to know exactly what we're working with, so we're going to turn that off and apply. Okay, and we can see that, yeah, it's actually renamed it here. So if we fix it, there, we're good. Now that we've made that change, I think it's a little bit smarter about downloading the other thing. So we'll download this .py file. And you can see now it's saying, oh, I want to name a text file. And we say, no, don't do that. Don't call it .text. Go, downloaded. And then this last IPyNB, this stands for IPython Notebook. We'll save that. Still not a text file. Okay, now that insanity is done with, and you won't have to deal with that on Mac OS or Linux. Now that this is done with and they are in my downloads folder, the last thing we're going to need from the internet here is an installation of Miniconda. So here's the Miniconda website, which I've linked to in the instructions. We want to scroll down to our system. In this case, it would be Windows, and we want to pick the 64-bit version. So if we click on that, if we're lucky, it will install. If we're unlucky, it just won't do it for some reason, unless we tell it to do it again. I don't know how much of this is just it's a virtual machine and the network's a little goofy with it versus it's Windows Edge. You'll see I'm just using all the default stuff. So this is the Edge web browser. I mean, if you prefer Chrome or Firefox, great. Anyway, all that stuff should be downloaded now. So we are going to install Miniconda. We should be able to just step through this. The defaults will be fine. Okay. Next, you are welcome to look at these things. I'm not going to open them up. All right, so Miniconda has been installed. Well, actually, Anaconda. So the difference is Miniconda is a smaller installation. It doesn't put in a bunch of extra packages. Anaconda is the whole everything. So if we go over to our Start menu or the equivalent on your system, we'll see we now have a folder called Anaconda, and we have these Anaconda shells. On Windows, it doesn't really matter which one you pick. I'm just going to go with the regular prompt here. Okay, and so the next thing we need to do is type in some commands. And if you aren't comfortable working with the terminal, don't worry, this is the only time we will need to do that. If you love the terminal, then you'll feel right at home here. So the very first thing we want to do is update Anaconda, and we do that with a command called conda. So we'll do conda update conda. And if you're wondering why do we need to update something we just downloaded, it's because it only packages the download every so often, and there in fact will be some updates. And conda is the program that's used to download different Python packages. So we want to make sure that we are on the very latest version of that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do here is an optional step, but what it will do is it will install a graphical program that takes the place of having to run these commands in the terminal. And I'm just guessing most of you would prefer that style. If you are a terminal fan, though, you are welcome to skip this. So we're going to conda install a package called Anaconda Navigator. There's a hyphen in there. And what this will do is it'll search for that package and install it along with its dependencies. We'll say yes. And now that that's finished, if we come down here in our Anaconda folder, we'll have a new program called Anaconda Navigator. We'll launch that in a moment. But for now, since we have the terminal open, let's finish installing everything from the terminal. So what we're going to do now is create something called a Python environment. And that'll be a self-packaged copy of Python along with the libraries that we're going to need for this class. And the reason we do that is that by having things in separate environments, they won't conflict. So if you say already have Python on your system for some purpose, the stuff we're going to install isn't going to conflict with it. Or if in the future you want to do something different with Python, again, the version we have for this class isn't going to conflict with it. So we're going to use conda environment create. We're going to create it from a file, and that file is this environment.yaml file. Now this particular file is in my downloads folder. The terminal here opened up in my home directory, which on Windows is this thing here, although with your particular Windows username. And we need to get there. So I'm going to type in the path to get there. In that case, it's going to be downloads / environment.yaml. If I spelled that right, it will start installing for us the stuff that's listed in that environment. And by building it from a file, what this does is it guarantees that we all have the same packages and more importantly, the same versions of the same packages. So once we do our installation, you do not want to update anything in this environment because part of the idea here is we want to make sure that if there are any bugs, we all have the same ones. And if they are bad enough, then I'll make an announcement in class about what to do. And maybe we'll update then. But fingers crossed, we won't have that issue and we'll all have exactly the same versions of all the same packages. And so we won't have the issue where something works on my computer and it doesn't work on yours or vice versa. And everything is installed. So you'll notice here we have this comment here about using this environment. We have to tell Conda that's the environment we want to use. So if we want to be outside of our environments, that's called base. And you might have noticed that word base in parentheses at the very beginning when we started all of this. If we're in an environment, it'll say the environment name. I'll show you all that in just a moment. So now everything's installed. Let's set up some folders for this class. Put this, of course, anywhere you want. I'm just going to put it under documents. I'm going to make a new folder and we'll just call it biz1321. And in that folder, we want to have a copy of this grading helper.py. Let me also grab this installation test so we can test everything. I'm going to copy those files. I hit Control-C to do that on Windows. I'm going to go to my folder and put them there. Again, you are free to put this wherever you want or call it wherever you want. All right, so let me show you how to launch things. We have two ways of launching a program called Jupyter, which is the one we will mostly be using to write Python programs. We can do it from that Anaconda prompt. So I'll go back to that. You'll see here it's saying we're in the base environment. I don't want to be in the base environment. I want to be in our environment. So the way I would do that in a terminal is I would type in conda activate and then the name of our environment, which was called biz1321, which really has nothing to do with what this folder is called. I used the same names because I thought that made sense, but the name of your folder can be whatever you want. The name of our environment is always going to be Phys1321. So if we hit enter here, it's going to show us we are in now that environment. Now that we are in there, we can run Jupyter Lab. It's going to open up our Jupyter notebook as soon as I hit enter. The other way to do this, I didn't hit enter there if you're wondering why it didn't open. The other way to do this is to come over to Anaconda Navigator. That's why we installed this. We won't have to use a terminal. We'll give that a moment to get started. Get that out of the way. Okay, in Anaconda Navigator, the way we would launch is, you can see here are the environment. We don't want to be in the base. Do the drop down here. We want to be in Phys1321. And we want to launch Jupyter Lab. So we just click this launch button here. Okay, so whether we launch from this program or if we launch instead from the terminal, we're going to end up here in Jupyter. And I'll show you the workings of Jupyter in another video. But for now, let's test to see if things are working. So I'm going to go to my Documents folder. You can see I'm doing this from inside Jupyter, Viz 1321. And let me make this a little bit bigger. You can see here's our installation test. This IPyNB is a notebook file. These are the files we're going to be working with in class. So I'm going to double click to open that up. And I want to check to see if everything is working. And so like it says here, I want to go up to run all cells, and let's see what happens. All right, so we want to be looking for a lack of error messages and for things to have happened. So no error messages, this integration worked. We've created a plot. We have a widget that we can move with a slider. We want to check to see if that one's working. So if you are, for some reason using an ancient version of Internet Explorer, that won't work, for example. It needs to be a newer web browser. So it works with Edge, Chrome, Firefox, I believe with Safari. But you want to make sure that's working. I'm going to check out your animations. I've, in the past, seen trouble with this working on Mac OS, and like it would work for some people and not other. And what that comes down to is creating the animations uses a library called FFmpeg, which we should have installed with Conda. But if for some reason that didn't work, there are other ways to install that on Mac OS that you might need to do if you don't see this animation here. And the last stuff here is testing to see the behavior of this grading helper. So this is a Python program that I wrote to help with grading. So it adds some background colors, it adds some tests. So what we want to see here is the colors it's asking for, like green. And this last one should be red. This should be what happens if you have an error in one of the tests that are being run. So in this case, we are expecting to see an error message. And we'll learn more about how to interpret these error messages later on in the class. So for now, we have everything installed. If you want to get out of here, you go File, Shutdown. And then you are, like it says, free to close the tab or what have you.